Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to play Corki. Now I think this is a solid top 4 comp and super easy to force, and so in today's video I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know and walking you through the early, mid and late game. Now the main pros of this comp is that it's easy to force as the units are pretty uncontested, it's easy to play as the pivots aren't that difficult, you don't need to change your units too much as you play throughout the game. It caps high if you have good augments, meaning you can go top 2, and it also has mixed damage, which means that you're going to be dishing out AP as well as AD, and you also have some item holders for both of the types. Now onto the main cons of this comp. First up, it is weak to Sins. You do have a Lulu, so there is a little bit of counterplay. It usually has a weak stage 4, as in the build up you're not usually carrying any 3 costs. And finally, it is a pretty unit dependent comp. You need to hit your specific units on your level 8 rolldown, so despite the fact that you set yourself up with a lot of gold, sometimes you just miss. And this is the final board. Notice how even though Jinx shares perfect synergies with Corki, you don't run her in your late game board ever. You want to be running Itis as your frontline because he synergizes really well with Corki, giving him attack speed and a shield. You always want to make sure you have at least 2 Guardian, usually this is going to be Braum. Sometimes you can run Thresh if you don't hit a Braum 2-star however. You cap your board by hitting all of these units 2-star, you can also throw in a Soraka once you get to level 9. Also, a really nice trick is to hold on to Namis because if you're versing an AP lobby, usually in the final 4 you can throw Nami in at 9 and the 3 Mystic makes a huge spike. Of course, if you don't hit Bard, up until that point you can run your other units such as Jinx. However, most of the time you're going to want to drop Jinx for literally anything else, including extra frontline if you hit. The reason is because the vertical synergies on Cannoneer and Revel just aren't that good on Corki. You'd much rather have value units such as Bard and or Soraka. Best in slot on Corki is Last Whisper, GS plus DB. You don't always need Last Whisper and GS, however you need to have at least one of them, otherwise Corki's going to get stuck on the front line. I is a perfectly fine replacement for DB, the damage output is slightly lower, however if you need to save HP during the early game then it's a good way to burn the gloves. Some good defensive options are Edge of Night if you're playing into a Sin lobby, but most of the time I don't really like this item because by the time it procs you've pretty much already lost the fight. QSS is pretty good if there's a lot of CC, and you can also go for a Gunblade which can be nice because it heals your Itis. However, make sure if you have a Gunblade you at least have 2 other damage items. You never want to run more than 1 defensive option. As for your frontline, you're always running Itis, who is a Guardian, which means that Warmorgs is not only really good early, but it's also a really good late game item because it increases the Guardian shield. On top of that, you can run other defensive items such as Declaw or Gargoyles because he's going to be solo frontline. You can also throw in a Bramble if you already have a Declaw, but usually it's pretty good to just slam a Gargoyle. On top of that, if you don't have any anti-heal with your augments, you usually want to be running a Sunfire Cape in the early and late game. Sunfire Cape can usually go on Itis. If you get 3 other items for him, you can throw the Sunfire Cape on Braum. Make sure that Braum's at least a 2-star or the Sunfire Cape unit is going to die. You can throw a Morello on your Sona, but this set, Sunfire Cape is a lot better than Morello. Another good slam is Zeke's because it buffs 3 really high value units, that being Corki, Lulu and Sona. You can also make Trapclaw if you don't already have a QSS and you think that you need it in your lobby. And finally, ZZ Rot is really good during the early game as it allows you to have frontline when you otherwise wouldn't, and late game it can just go on Braum to stall out a little bit longer for Corki. You never get early Sona items because you only ever want to run her at 8, however during the final carousels, if you've already itemized your Corki and Itis, you can start picking up some items for her because she does actually do work at 2-star. Usually you want to get a Shojin first, then you can throw on any extra AP items. A lot of generic augments are obviously good in this comp, but I'll go over the ones that make it significantly better. Starting out with the silvers, we have Stand United 1. You get a lot of Stand United value in this comp, so all the Stand Uniteds are good. You can also go for Weak Spot, which means you don't necessarily need a Sunfire, which is also really nice. Increases Corki's AD damage as well. All of the Cybernetics are good because you also want Uplink on your backline units as you have a Sona, Lulu and Corki and you want them casting. Second Wind 1 is really good, however you don't really want Second Wind 2 as much because you're playing down a gold augment, however it's not that bad. Best Friend 1 is pretty good, however you don't really want the later ones. It can also make your positioning into Sins very difficult, so make sure that you're scouting the lobby before you take this augment. The exact same thing goes for Exiles 1 as well. Celestial Blessing 1 is pretty good, same for Thrill, just a little bit of extra healing, but you never want to go for the golden versions. Item Grab Bag's nice because you can use pretty much all items in this comp. Makeshift Armor is pretty good because it goes on to your Nomsy, however you'd much rather put 3 items on your Itis, so he's not going to be getting the value anyway. You're playing a pretty backline heavy comp anyway, so I don't really like this augment that much. All of the hearts are good, such as Cannoneer, Guardian, and Revel. However, you don't want to go for the spat most of the time, as this doesn't spike your board any more than the silver augment does. And finally, Axiom Arc 1 is pretty good at all stages throughout the game because you're going to be carrying Tristana, who uses it really well as Corki in the late game. However, you don't really want to go for Axiom Arc 2 because you don't really need that much extra mana. Moving on to the gold augments, we have Gadget Expert is really good this set because Shiv is just such a broken item. Late game it can just go onto your Sonar. You actually don't really like Heroic Presence because you're probably only running 2 Guardian in the late game and it doesn't do that much extra damage anyway. As for Hotshot, this is a really good replacement if you don't already have a Sunfire Cape, otherwise it's not that good. Pandora's Bench is good if you're already high rolling, however keep in mind you're playing down a gold augment until you hit your upgrades, so you don't want to take it when you're in a lost streak position. Living Forge is okay because you can use most of the items, just keep in mind that if you get a bad item in your first or your second, then sometimes you're playing down a Prismatic which can be really bad and you won't make it to your third item, but overall it's relatively safe. Think Fast is good if you have the gold for it on 4-2 for a roll down, however most of the time you won't actually have the gold for it. March of Progress is pretty bad for this comp because you want to go fast 8 and there's no 3 cost that you really want to roll for on 7. Level Up on the other hand is quite good because you want to go fast 8 and you cap your board at 9 and or 10. High-end shopping is decent, however keep in mind you're playing down a Prismatic, so you only want to take this when you're in a high roll position so that you can go to level 7 as soon as possible, and you can even roll on 7 to try and get most of your board. Otherwise, if you can ever make it to 8, then you're in a really good spot to utilize high-end shopping. The most important thing about the early game in this comp is stacking Nomsy and saving HP. I usually try and play this comp when I get an early Heimer, Trist and or Lulu. You can run 3 trainer early for faster stacking if you get this lucky, and keep in mind you feed more stacks per star level, so I usually only greed 3 trainer if I at least have a Heimerdinger 2, otherwise I'll just drop him for some better units. If you're playing around early cannoneers, this usually means playing Jinx, so if you happen to hit a Kench 2, then you can play around a Bruiser frontline. Otherwise, Guardians are usually going to be your default because they're slightly better, and also it makes the transition easier once you finally get your Itis. You can also play Cavalier frontline if you need to, however most of the time you would rather avoid it. You want to try and be 6 on 3-2, and if you need to roll this game, this is the best time to do so. The reason is because you want to carry Tristana 2 all the way up until level 8, which is when you're going to swap her out for Corki. Rolling on 7 in this comp is only done out of desperation. The reason you don't want to roll too deep on 7 is because you're going to get extra units that you can't actually afford to hold, such as Sonar. Tristana 2 is actually stronger than Corki 1, which is why you want to try and make sure that you get a Tristana 2 every single game you're playing this opener. Of course, if you need to, you can desperation roll on 7, but most of the times you want to try and avoid it. Again, you're just looking for your Guardian frontline. Usually this means you're going to be trying to 2-star Tristana, Jinx, Braum, and Thresh. However, if you're playing a Bruiser frontline, then of course you want to 2-star units like Shen, and Alawi is another great Bruiser that you can throw in. At 5-1, you're ideally level 8 with at least 40 to 50 gold. You want to roll down, hit Itis 2, Corki 2, Sona 2, Lulu 2. You can remake the Tristana and move the items to Corki. However, make sure not to do this until you hit Corki 2. Tristana 2 will still be a better item holder if you're stuck with Corki 1. At this point, you can drop your Jinx and Kench if you were playing them before, and you always want to make sure that you have at least 2 Guardians so that Itis is getting that shield. Again, if you get lucky and hit any legendaries such as Soraka or Bard, you can throw them in, and if it's an AP heavy lobby, then you can keep your Nami and play that as well. You might have noticed this game, I actually have a Mage Spat on my Sonar. You can actually cap this board really high if you get a Mage Spat on a later carousel, as you can drop Tristana for Heimerdinger. Early game, if you have a Mage Spat, you can just put it on your Tristana, as she does a lot of damage as she's casting 4 times, dropping 4 bombs on 4 different people. It can be a little bit risky because you have to run Heimerdinger and another Mage in the early game, and it's for this reason why I wouldn't chase a Mage Spat. However, if you can afford it, it's actually not that bad. The reason is because the synergies line up really well during the early and mid game, and then late game, if you have a Mage Sona and you position her correctly, she's going to be stunning not only the front line multiple times per fight, but also if you position her diagonally opposite from a carry, if they don't have a QSS, then Mage Sona is going to be stunning them for pretty much the entirety of the fight. You can cap your board with, of course, Nami because she synergizes really well to give Mystic. You don't need to run Cannoneer in this comp, so you can just drop Tristana for your Heimerdinger. However, of course, Zoe is always going to be better than a Nami unless you really need the Mystic, just because Zoe is such a good mage and she gives infinite frontline with her abilities. The first Shimmer Scale item will change every single game, and having an idea of which one it is will change how you play the game. However, sometimes there's not too much you can do. For example, with Determined Investor, ideally you're high rolling an early itis so that you can guarantee that you get the diamonds hand as soon as possible, but if you can't, then it's whatever. Once you get your diamonds hands, you always want it to be on your itis. This gives you so much front line that it's never worth putting on any other unit. Draven's Axes is really good if you high roll it early, however, most of the time you're not going to have enough gold to really get the AD benefit, so I usually just chuck it on your Tristana. However, if you are high rolling and you can get 80 gold in your bank, then it's a really good item to put on your Corki. Gambler's Blade is by far one of the worst Shimmer Scale items. You can put it on your Corki if you have 80 gold, but most of the time you're not really going to have damage gold, so you'd rather just itemize Corki and then chuck the Gambler's Blade on Tristana or Sona just for some faster casting. And then once you get up enough gold, you can put it on a high value unit, but most of the time you're not really going to care about this item too much. Goldmancer stuff, if you high roll an itis early, can go on your Tristana or whoever you're carrying at the time. This will allow you to get a few extra kills. However, in the late game, if you have gold, you actually want this item to go on your itis if you can afford to put an extra item on him. This is because the healing and the shielding scales with AP. So let's say that you have 80 gold in your bank and you put Goldmancer stuff on itis, then the shield you're going to be getting on your entire team is really, really good. Mogul's Mail is one of the safest options. You can just chuck it on your itis for extra frontline. The reason it's so good is because you don't actually need any gold in your bank, so you can safely roll down to 0 gold, and this item is still going to be very useful. Needlessly Big Gem is one of the best ways to cap your board. This is because you're basically getting a free Ascension, which is one of the best augments in the game. And if you can get up to 80 gold, you're getting Ascension with 80% value. Make sure to put this on your backline units because itis can sometimes die before 15 seconds. However, you can actually choose this item. You don't need to place it on immediately because if your backline units die to Sins, then you're not going to be playing with this augment. So what you want to do is place it once you see who you're versing and put it on the unit who is least likely to die in the fight. And that is the end of the video. Remember that when you're trying to play around Corki, you can also play Tristana reroll with very similar augments and items. So if you like both of the comps, then you can flex in between the two of them. Don't forget that Sona's bait when you get her early. You only want to throw her in at level 8. Remember that this is a solid meta comp, and it might become harder to play if Tristana gets some nerfs. However, it's really easy to force right now because Tristana 2 is super easy to get, and you can carry her all the way to 8 if you have the right items. Let me know what other comps or videos you would like to see, and make sure to follow me on Twitch as I've been streaming a lot more frequently recently, so if you want to see some more Set 7 gameplay, then come check me out. Link is down in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.